I'm feeling it too a little bit, but that's and we were saying this off camera too. Like that's really what the book is about doing life even when it's going to be messy. There's never a perfect time to do anything, so you really just got to jump in and do it, and that's what we're doing. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And I think one thing I've really learned is that bring in help. I hired this sweet young woman named Madden. She's literally 18 years old when I hired her, and she was my TikTok coach. Like, and she taught me the game of TikTok. And I feel like we really do need to be open to asking for help with the things we don't know how to do. We can't be experts in everything. And so, yeah, she helped me entry into the TikTok pool for sure. I get asked that a lot because some people will say, well, what about other generations? They experienced huge catastrophic events. I mean, take World War II, for example, right? But I think what's really different for these two generations is that we so lack community in a whole new way. Yes, we're inundated by social media, but we often don't know who our neighbors are. We're having friends, but they're not necessarily face to face, right? You're in Raleigh, I'm in California. We're much more spread out now. And so people feel way more isolated and alone. We're having this loneliness epidemic, right? And there are so many things in the world right now that make people feel really unsafe. Like doing the research of the book and seeing that 75% of young adults say they feel unsafe every single day in America and attribute a lot of that to things like gun violence. When we go in our world day to day and everywhere feels unsafe, whether it's the grocery store, the movies, a place of worship, that puts our alert system on high edge all the time. And that's exhausting. Mhm, mhm. I so agree. Like the existential anxiety is like through the roof. I very much feel that. Even driving Derek to daycare today, like being in a car. I don't know if you feel that driving places, like it really brings up some new stuff. And at the same time, I talk about this with a lot of parents. It makes us face the reality that there are things in this world, a lot of things that we can't control. And it's funny, the more we try and control, the more out of control we tend to feel. So relinquishing some of that is so hard to do. But I think that's a bit of the pathway to be able to live day to day and still be able to enjoy our lives. Mhm, mhm, mhm. Mhm. Yes. Mhm. It's definitely true. I mean, the fear center of the brain, the amygdala, which is housed so deep in our head, it's so primal. It really can't differentiate between the tiger and getting up and doing a big speaking gig, right? Or having a tough conversation at work. Your brain just feels that sensation of fear and says, "Ah, like that's it." So, really, a lot of the work that I do with folks is teaching us how to sit with that distress because a lot of us, it's uncomfortable. And so, what do we want to do? We either want to numb, or the most common response is we want to avoid. So we say, it's not a good time for this. I'm not ready, right? A lot of people tuning in may want to be speakers, but I need just a little more time. No more time. It's time to do it, right? And so it's really about learning how to sit with that distress and behaviorally showing ourselves we're capable. Because one thing I often talk about, positive thinking is not enough. Our brains are so powerful, they're very good BS detectors. So you have to show yourself behaviorally, oh, I got up and I did do that speech, and the world didn't fall apart. And then the brain starts to buy in and give credit and say, okay, maybe you can do this thing after all. Yeah. Mm, mhm, mm, mhm. Yes, the behavioral activation is so, so key. And that's why one of the biggest treatments for anxiety is exposure and response prevention, right? Is exposing ourselves to those things that we feel afraid of and then seeing that we can, in fact, handle that distress. But one thing I talk about too in generation anxiety is really holistically healing ourselves too. It's not just the cognitive approach. You know, Western medicine is so focused on the brain, but really, especially anxiety and depression, it's such somatic experiences. The whole body experiences it. And I talk a lot about how, you know, for me, what healed my panic attacks more than anything was working with my naturopath, getting my blood work done, seeing the imbalances in my body, like that was what was so restorative for me personally. So I'm excited to see where the field goes with that because I don't think it's just the therapy or the psychiatric piece of it. I think we've got to look at a whole holistic approach to help us heal. Mhm. 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 Uh-huh. Mhm. 100%. I am so amazed by women on a daily basis. And, you and I are both new moms this year, and I know one thing I really struggled with, why I, put off my own avoidance of having kids. That was my own anxiety of like, I'm not ready. I can't do it. You know, we can be so focused on our careers, which is amazing that I think I told myself a narrative, well, I can't be a parent at the same time. And something I've really learned this year is like, embrace the mess. Like, it doesn't have to be so perfect. I think millennials, especially, we were really fed a narrative as children to strive for achievement, get that gold star. You don't see it quite as much with Gen Z, but millennials, we absolutely feel that. And so, well, if I can't be perfect at my job and a perfect parent, then I don't want to do this. And it's really fascinating even to see about 40% of young adults today say they don't want to have children, for example, because of the anxiety that they feel with it. And, one thing that's been really liberating for me personally is to see that I don't have to do either thing perfectly, but really leaning into like, what are our personal values? For me, like starting a family was a personal value. So that meant embracing the discomfort of maybe not always being perfect at my job, maybe not always being a perfect parent, and both of those things being okay. Mhm. Mm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's the bucket with a hole in it, right? It's never enough. It's so funny that you mentioned that, and I love that story. It reminds me, I was just driving the other day and I heard that song, The Middle. Do you know that song? It just takes time. Yeah. Literally, that was, like, our high school song, and I remember thinking, like, "Wow, that is so true, I'm in the middle," right? And then I heard it this past week, I'm like, "Still rings true today," like, still in the middle, like, "Little girl, take some time." So, it was such a reminder to me, like, we're always, like, in the middle, we never are fully arriving, and I think that's such a cool, exciting thing, and at the same time, like, being okay with that, right? Like, you and I are both, I'd say, like, pretty big go-getters. We're both Enneagram 3s, if I remember correctly. Um, and it's like the blessing and the curse, right? Because that ambition can be so exciting, and yet sometimes it's like this hunger, and it's like, "Can't I just be satiated? Like, can't I just be satisfied?" And I think that's the plight, right? Is learning, like, you can rest. Like, we don't always have to be go, go, going because otherwise, I think it's really easy to start living our lives saying, like, "Oh, I'll be happy when this is over. I'll be happy when I get through my book launch," right? Like, it's so easy to have that mentality. And then we go through our lives and be like, shoot, I wish the whole thing away. I was always looking at the next milestone marker. And so that's like a constant challenge I find within myself is just learning to like sit with it. There could always be something next, and probably knowing you and I both, there probably always will be a next goal, right? But learning how to be okay with where we are in the middle, I think that's the real like striving point. Something I haven't fully mastered. I haven't gotten my Simone Biles moment on that yet, but work in progress, you know? Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. 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 This is a very simple tip, but I think it's really important. We call it chunking in psychology, which I'm like, we need to come up with a different name for that. Right? Just chunk it. But essentially it's this idea of like take it into the smallest pieces possible because these are huge goals, right? Like I want to start a speaking career or I want to write a book. That can feel so insurmountable. So like taking it in the smallest pieces of like, you know what, I'm going to set 5 minutes on the clock and put pen to paper today or pitch a few, businesses today to ask them. The other thing that I think is huge is you have to ask people who are in the game and doing it. Find mentors. I talk about this a lot, the 5 seconds of courage. I think you and I both, we're fearless in that way. Like we'll go up to anybody and say, like, how did you do that? Can I learn from you? And I have gotten no many times. Like that's totally fine, right? But it doesn't have to stop you from saying, like, hey, I'd love to learn more from you. And so I think we have to be fearless in that way and give ourselves credit for showing up by just asking the questions. And I talk about this as a metaphor in the book. You got to jump in the pool. Like the water's going to be cold, but jump in the pool, get in the water, swim in it because the longer you stand on the diving board looking down doing that teeter totter, the higher it's gonna seem, and then you're gonna, like, walk back down the ladder and be like, "Oh, man, I didn't jump in the pool." So you gotta just step in and go and chunk it up, small pieces, the better. Mhm. Yes. Mhm. Mhm. Oh, man, yeah. Well, and I don't know if you're like this, but I definitely get very nervous before I speak, and the longer that I go without doing it, the harder it gets, like I know. I'm speaking in Savannah next week, and it's my first one back, and I'm like, "Oh boy, here we go, here we go." So yeah, I mean, the one of the big things coming back to the body work is this diaphragmatic breath, this umbrella breath, like really expanding your rib cage. Yoga is a great way to tap into this. But often when we're anxious as speakers, we start doing that chest breath, and then we feel lightheaded. So before I go on stage, I almost envision myself as like the skiers in the Olympics before they go and they're like Michaela Schifrin, she's like standing up there like ready before they ring the bell, it's just like that. It's that same moment of like, all right, we're about to like launch the gate. And so I have those deep breaths before I go, and that really helps center and ground me. The other thing I really like to do, I like to try and meet as many people in the audience before I get on stage. I try and learn their name, I shake their hand, I ask how their day is going, I get to know them, because then it humanizes everybody in the room. I know who the humans are in the room, and they know a little bit more of me. So I never like to go do a gig and like just wait in the wings. I like to get amongst the audience and meet people. Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Mhm. 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 Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, and I have actively experienced panic attacks mid talk. So, when that has happened, I do really like to have a few things in place. I mean, the field is a little bit divided on this. Like with classic exposure work for anxiety, the thought is like, no, tough it out, like, jump in. But I do like to have some things in place as a speaker. I like to have some water there on stage. That's a must for me. I don't overly caffeinate before I speak because the jitters that you feel in the body can be so real. And then sometimes I've even had it where I will have a chair on stage just in case, and I don't think that's a weakness to like have those like mechanics in place, but that kind of mentally comforts me to know like, all right, if I'm because I've had times where I'm like, I feel like I'm about to like hurl. If you have that there ready for you, I think that can provide some comfort. And that's all okay. I've never actually like gotten sick during a keynote, but I share all that